deals with the request or requests received during public consultation that we should, to an extent, accommodate cultural and religious communities. The deadline for their submissions was today, or before today. I did receive some inputs from the Rastafarian community last week, and I did receive some of them this morning. So I have not yet considered it fully. And what was especially required in that submissions, or was required to be addressed in the submissions, was amongst others the criteria that must be used to identify those communities, the purposes in the practices for which cannabis is used, quantitative limitations on what may be possessed and used, etc. I did glance through the new submissions I received this morning. It's still inconclusive. There is certain gaps, but probably need further consultation. But I did last night quickly try to draft a clause that do provide for that. The provision is to the effect that representative of a culture or religious community may apply for a permit to authorize a cultural community to possess, sell, buy, use, etc. cannabis for cultural and religious purposes, subject to such conditions and restrictions or requirements that may be specified in the permit. We provide that the minister may require the applicant to provide further information, and we further provide that the minister may, if he's satisfied that the permit should be issued, a certain process need to be followed for the approval of the permit. One must remember that one of the main issues in the Alum case is, amongst others, the fact that certain people are dealt with on other basis than certain other people, which is not allowed. So to be on the safe side, the process that is provisionally provided for is to the effect that the permit and the necessary documents which was considered by the minister must be submitted to Parliament for consideration, and Parliament must then approve the permit which will allow such community to be exempted from certain provisions in the bill to use cannabis, possess, sell, distribute, etc. cannabis for cultural and religious purposes. It then provides for the publication of the permit in the Gazette. It imposes a limitation for the period for which the permit may be issued, provides that if the minister is not satisfied that the permit should be issued, you can refuse that. And the minister must inform the applicant of his decision and provide reasons, therefore, provides for a clause in terms of which the minister may terminate a permit if there is non-compliance with such a permit. That is obviously subject to the audi alteram patent principle. But again, the criteria and the requirements for the issuing of such a permit has not been sufficiently clarified. Submissions that were submitted or received from the Rastafarian community, it did indicate certain provisional considerations that must be taken into account, amongst others that it must be cultural religious community, and they must demonstrate that if cannabis is used for cultural religious practices. They must indicate that the prescribed quantities for personal use is inadequate for their purposes. There must be a specific place for them to cultivate or store cannabis, and there must be appropriate measures to distribute or provide cannabis to other members. So this is still work in progress and probably need further consultation. Thank you. I'm going to stop there. Is there any response?
Members, Honorable Swart.
Chair, I'm fascinated at the inclusion of Parliament to consider the awarding of such a permit. I would like to, I'm not necessarily opposed to it, but whether it is practically, because normally it would be the executive that would issue such a permit, and that exercise, Parliament would exercise oversight over that executive function. That's the first question. I'm not necessarily opposed to it, but I just try to understand how it would work practically. I don't think I've ever heard of, and Mr. Robertson might correct me, but of a portfolio committee sitting to consider an award of such a permit or something like that. That's the first issue. The second issue is the involvement of Chapter 9 institutions, including the Commission for Cultural, Religious and Language Rights. They might have a role to play in this as well, but are we not as Parliament here possibly usurping a role that the executive would play in the award of such a permit? And then, sorry, I haven't read it completely, but does it also mean, I think that the seemingly contradiction, if I've read it correct, is that the minister can then end the permit if the conditions are not there. If Parliament grants the permit, then Parliament must be the one to end the permit. And that's why it could be a bit contentious whether Parliament enters this domain of the executive. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Robertson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. There's various pieces of legislation that provide that subordinate legislation must be approved by Parliament before it's published in the Gazette, or before it can be made by the executive. I do agree with Mr. Swart. Yes, obviously the person that exercises a function must, if there is amendment of the powers, the same person must exercise that. That will be created, provided for in the bill. The main thing is that subordinate legislation must, in some instances, be approved by Parliament before it can be published in the Gazette. And obviously a permit I can provide for regulations, amongst others, that indicate that the communities that may be exempted or that falls within this, and the conditions thereto, and provide that such regulations must be submitted and approved by Parliament before publication. Just use the other word, permit, in this instance. It's still subordinate legislation, and it should be treated on the same basis as regulations that need to be approved by Parliament before publication. That's my response in respect thereof.
Thank you. Does that cover you, Honorable Swart?
That is much clearer. Thank you. I support that. It should be a form of a regulation that is passed, tabled with and passed by Parliament, as opposed to the granting of a permit in specific cases.
Yeah, that would muddy the whole situation. I think the regulations can come to Parliament. Would you amend it accordingly, Mr. Robertson?
I will amend it accordingly.
Let's proceed.
Thank you. Other amendments were in most instances previously discussed in the committee. Just need probably further guidance how to deal with it. I think previously there was no objection to the amendment of clause 3.2 to provide that between adults and per occasion certain cannabis products may be distributed. Going to leave it at that unless there is other indication. I also did discuss the self-medication requirements in excess of prescribed quantities previously. There was no previous remarks in this regard or adverse comments thereto. I'm not going to discuss this further. Consequential amendments have not been affected further, and that's obviously subject to the approval of the proposed amendment proposed in the subclause to clause 2. So question is, must I amend or affect the appropriate amendments, or is this still under consideration by the committee? Cultivation offences, that was also discussed previously. I did, during my discussions with Judge Cameron, among others, raised the issue of criminalization and sentences that may be imposed in respect of contraventions of the law from a regulatory perspective, or let's call it regulatory enforcement offences. I did indicate that he is of the view that we should regulate it similar to tobacco and alcohol, especially alcohol. So the offences may need to be revised to make it, in some instances, less serious if there's a contravention, or rather the sentences that must be imposed should be less serious that is currently prescribed in accordance with the Liquor Act. As a chairperson, all the other amendments were previously discussed in the committee. I should continue and explain it again for comment, or at least some kind of indication of what I must consider or further expand on or not. Also just
proceed in the manner you were proceeding. I'm monitoring members. Members would raise hands as when they have issues to raise. When they have not raised their hands, we take it that they are fine.
Okay. First option I just propose is to clause 3.2, and that provides for requirements and standards that is to be prescribed. It do remove the subjective element of take reasonable measures to ensure that cannabis plants is inaccessible out of the provision. Subclause 4 Paragraph A is amended to make it a less serious offense if a person exceeds a prescribed quantity. The paragraph B is also amended to make the less serious offense in respect of trafficable quantities of cannabis plants that a person obtains to provide to another person. Option to subclause 5. I did previously indicate that in terms of the current provisions of the bill, it allows for the provision of flowering cannabis plants without remuneration between adult persons. I did indicate that we probably need to limit this to immature cannabis plants, that is, cannabis plants without the fruit or flower that contains THC, and that we should tone down the class of offense and obviously also the sentence that may be imposed in respect thereof. The amendments to paragraph B is to a similar effect. Paragraph C, it's my submission, and after discussion with Judge Gordon, that we can probably consider a lesser class of offense in respect thereof in certain circumstances. That will be considered at a later stage. And then the new subclause 6 provide for the dealing in immature cannabis plants that's currently not catered for as a result of the previous discussed amendments, as well as the classes that falls within a trafficable quantity or commercial quantity. Paragraph B of that subsection is retained to the effect that the person who deals in the flowering cannabis plants guilty of a Class A offense. Next clause is clause 4 that deals with certain cannabis offenses. The only real amendment there too relates to subclause 3, which again make the storing of cannabis subject to the issuing of regulations that must prescribe the storing thereof. And it's an offense if a person does not comply therewith. Regarding smoking and consumption offenses, there was no amendments to that paragraph. Offenses involving a child, only real amendment there too was that to subclause 1B, where a correction is made to the fact that the cannabis plants must be cannabis plant that a guardian may lawfully cultivate if a child is to assist him and not possess. I think it was discussed in detail previously. Subclause 6 was a proposal that we can disregard. I'm not going to deal with that further. It's not necessary. The penalties, there was a previous option which make it less serious offenses. After discussion with Judge Gordon, we can probably, in instances where it does not affect a child, further prescribe lesser sentences that may be imposed. expungement of criminal records. There's no amendments proposed thereto. Sorry, there was amendments proposed thereto. And that was to cater for where certain persons were deemed to have dealt with in cannabis in terms of unconstitutional provisions that contains a presumption and which has been declared unconstitutional. And it do provide further for the expungement of criminal records of such persons that were deemed to be guilty of dealing in cannabis under such unconstitutional presumption. With certain amendments, consequential amendments affected to that clause. Regulations, the clause dealing with the regulations have been amended as a result of some of the amendments proposed to the expungement clause. And I did discuss that in respect of cannabis for medicinal purposes, regulations need to be made in consultation with the cabinet member responsible for health to comply with, to prescribe what information must the certificate contemplated in the proposed new clause 24D contain, and that is to the effect that that certificate must indicate that the person has a certain condition and he intends to treat himself by means of cannabis. The main thing is that it must identify a medical condition. The other amendments is to the schedule, and it's very dependent on what amendments is preferred to the bill, and the schedules to the Act will be amended in accordance with such suggestion. Previously, I did discuss the amendments to the National Road Traffic Act, and that is to criminalize conduct where a person consumes THC and then drive a motor vehicle. That was discussed in depth. I will submit a summary of the American position to the committee for further consideration. There has been certain objections that has been raised to the limitation, or rather to criminalize the person who is above a certain limitation of THC to handle a motor vehicle. Many American states follow the current provision that is provided for in the National Road Traffic Act, namely that the person must be under the influence of THC. But I also did indicate that various other countries follow other regulatory measure and do criminalize the handling of a motor vehicle when a person is intoxicated or has THC in his blood that is above a certain limitation. So that is probably also open for consideration. The Child Justice Act provision was discussed previously. I did indicate that the LM judgment that is currently under consideration by the Constitutional Court to the effect that the status of offence that the child may not possess or use cannabis may be declared unconstitutional. In the proposed order, I think, or the order that was proposed to the Constitutional Court, the Council of the Minister concede that the declaration of invalidity must actually be approved by the Constitutional Court. And I also did previously explain that certain offences do still apply in respect of a child. We contravene, amongst others, certain provisions of the bill that deals with cannabis offences. Again, if there is order by the Constitutional Court, the clause will obviously, or this amendment will obviously be further considered. And that's the end of the bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Roberts. Are there any comments, members? Maybe what we should say is that we are fine with the bill subject to those issues that are outstanding. One being the issue of the HTC, the 0.2% and the 1%, the issue about public participation. We are still waiting for Dr. Lutz to give us an opinion on that. But other than that, except if members have got other issues to raise, depending on the legal opinion that we will receive from Dr. Lutz and further information that we will receive from Mr. Roberts on the issue of the HTC, then we will proceed to finalize the bill. Members, we should bear in mind that our legislative program is quite full for this year. So we should, to the extent possible, try and ensure that before we rise this term, we should ensure that this bill is either passed or is on the advanced stage, at an advanced stage of being passed, because we still have the land court bill, we still have the public hearings on the hate crime, hate speech, we still have bill relating to jigs. So there are quite a number of bills that needs to be passed for this year. So I think we should try to the best we can to ensure that by the time this term comes to an end, this bill is passed or is at an advanced stage. Honorable Bredenbach.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There's just one issue that I need to raise before Mr. Roberts goes, and that is in clause 6 of this bill, there's a reference to a guardian. I forgot to raise it earlier. And while we have referred to a guardian, when in the Children's Act, there's a much looser idea around parental rights. A guardian may not be a caregiver. So if you could just have a look at that, he doesn't have to answer me now. If we can just get some clarity on that at our next meeting as well. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
So the definition of a guardian. Okay. Mr. Roberts, would you look at that? Honorable Maseko Jele.
Thank you, Chair. I saw that also.
Honorable Jele, there is a problem with your mic.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me?
She is under the tree.
Yes, yes, yes. The tree has moved. The tree has moved from Eastern Cape to Gauteng.
Cape Town, Chair, Cape Town.
Oh, that is why, yeah.
When we don't have connectivity issues in Cape Town.
No, you. Today you've got it, my sister. Chair, I was just asking about that. I didn't want to raise a hand when he was on that point of clause 5. I wanted to find out if maybe he was still going to consider that the issue that I raised earlier.
Oh, yes, clause 5, Mr. Robertson. Let's quickly go to clause 5.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson.
Maybe before, so that I don't become presumptuous, do you have a response to Honorable Glenis Breitenbach, or would you want to think about it for tomorrow's meeting?
Sorry, Mr. Chairperson, I've got a connectivity problem as well. She did raise something about the garden.
Yes.
And then I couldn't hear further.
I'll send it to Mr. Robertson by WhatsApp and then you can have a look at it.
Okay, I'll do that. Regarding clause 5, thanks for reminding me. And I did indicate previously that the amendment to clause 5 should probably be considered to the effect that the minister may on notice in the Gazette declare certain areas to be areas where a person cannot consume or use or smoke or possess cannabis. I will provide for appropriate amendment to that by tomorrow.
Okay. Okay. Did you get that, Honorable Chair? That further clarity will be provided tomorrow? Honorable Chair?
I'm happy. Am I still under the tree, Chair? Hello?
Under the tree. Or
Okay, I'm happy, Chair. No, I'm fine.
You're fine. Okay.
Yes,
Okay. Honorable Breitenbach, is that a legacy hand or a new hand?
It's actually an old hand, Mr. Chair, but I do have something to say. So I see that we have a courtesy of Eskom run by the ANC. We have load shedding until Saturday. And so there may be connectivity issues tomorrow in Cape Town for the committee. So
the story forward, Glenis. What is that?
Hey, what?
What is the ANC then van you?
Who runs Eskom? The ANC, certainly not anybody else.
Can you come back to the meeting?
Now you're under a tree, Trey.
Honorable Breitenbach?
Now you're under a tree.
I'm under the tree.
Yeah, when nobody could hear what you said just now. You were under the tree. Can you say it again?
Oh, I was saying that now let's come back to the meeting. So are you done that? Because I understood you to be saying that you might have connection problems tomorrow.
Yeah, everyone who's in Cape Town may have, because I see the load shedding is scheduled for 8 to 10:30 tomorrow morning.
8 to 10:30.
In your area, what area is that?
I don't know if I can disclose that to you on a public platform.
Hey, yeah, no. Honorable Horn, I think now you do understand why we need international mediation.
Yeah, well, no, I still think it is really just Labola negotiations that must happen.
So that is part of the
Sugar.
that is part of the international mediation that is required. Labola, we will delegate Honorable Ngola to negotiate the number of cows from Honorable Janji to Honorable Gutenberg.
I don't have
Yes, Chair.
No, that donation must
very
be
good
made
on
to
that.
me there.
To you.
I don't have the time. Janky doesn't have the money.
Okay. So how many members will be affected tomorrow? I know Honorable Janji is not part of that.
I won't be affected too, Chair.
Chair,
Honorable Horn?
yeah, unless I've missed the further announcements on it, I have it that the load shedding is only up to 5 o'clock in the morning. And then it's stopped again during working hours, but I may have missed the announcements that it's now on a 24-hour cycle.
Well, either way, I'll log in on my phone. I might just have problems.
Yes, I mean, I was also not sure that I'm using my phone as a hotspot. Let's proceed tomorrow and we can see how far we go. Mr. Roberts, you would be able to report on the issues that are outstanding tomorrow or on some of them?
I'll try to report on all the issues by tomorrow, Mr. Chair.
Tomorrow, yes. And then we will see how far do we go tomorrow. But let's try and ensure that before the end of this term, this bill is finalized. And then on Dr. Lutz will advise us tomorrow as to when can we get the legal opinion. Possibly we might need a very short meeting on the 15th, and then we proceed to have the subcommittee meeting maybe after an hour or so on the 15th, but that is subject to a discussion with the chair of the subcommittee for the 15th, because we are targeting to the term ends on the 1st of April. We are planning to have a review meeting to check whether we are on course and to plan for the next term on the 1st. So let's try and ensure that by that time the bill is passed by the House. But let's also ensure that that issue of the tagging by Dr. Lutz, we will see how far does it take us. But let's strive to have the bill passed before the end of the term. Are there any issues? Or we asked, I think we are done with the bill. Thank you very much, Mr. Roberts and your team, and Dr. Lutz for your assistance. Thank you very much. We asked the chair of the subcommittee and Honorable Glenis Breitenbach about the issues that they were supposed to report to the committee with respect to the workshops that we need to have. And that is the workshop with Judge Cameron, the preparations, and with Professor Martin, and then also the program, the oversight program for the whole year. One of the issues that I was going to suggest members was that we might need to, especially the team that went to the inland provinces, myself, Honorable Horn, Mamujele, and Honorable Ramulubeng, we might really consider to have, because we had to adopt a truncated program because our program was not approved. But I think there's an urgent need for us to go to Limpopo. Honorable Breitenbach would know that some of these things get discussed at the JSC level. We don't want a situation where a parliament is accused of having just cut a program that excluded one of the provinces because we have already received a letter from the JP of Limpopo. So maybe we might, as part of the program that you should be working on, that we need to finish that part of the visit so that we can have a comprehensive program and a response. Honorable Janji, Honorable Breitenbach.
Thanks, Honorable Chair. Yes, Honorable Janke and I had a discussion, and then we approached both of Judge Cameron and Professor Munting. Judge Cameron, both institutions were very pleased to hear from us and are very keen to do these workshops, and they have made some suggestions. You reminded me that the JSC is sitting in May, so we need to just be mindful of those dates. So I have sent to you their suggestions, and I thought that if you're happy with those suggestions, then Honourable Janke is happy with the suggestions. Then, if you're happy with them, Chair, then I will continue to negotiate with them and set up a program which I can then send to you to have a look at. It looks like the dates will be are pretty flexible. The inspecting judge suggested dates in May. Bearing in mind the obligations of the JSC, we'll have a look at that, but I think that could work. And then the proposed workshop with Professor Munting is also suggested to be over 2 days. And if you're happy with the proposals, then I'll go ahead and set dates. The only day that they're not available is the 22nd of March. But we won't be available then either. It'll have to be some time further into the future than the 22nd of March. So I will set up dates with him, and then I'll come back to the committee and we can just confirm those dates if that's suitable. As far as the oversight program goes, we need a little bit more time to discuss 1 or 2 issues and also look at what we discussed about an international study tour. I need to talk to Honourable Self because he had some very good ideas about that. So I need to go out and see him and get his input as well. And then we can come back to you with the oversight proposals.
Okay, can you circulate to other members what you sent me so that other members can also have input?
Sorry, I'm on mute now. I will send it to everybody. Thank you.
Thank you very much. But I would think that we would need a definite direction from the study group, not study group, from the committee on the issue of Limpopo, because usually when we come back, we might have a week or so for oversight. Even if we don't have it, I think it would be important that we approach the House chairperson so that we can have that visit to Limpopo, which would be concluding the first round of oversight that we had. And then we can, and then your suggestions and the program for the year would, once you have concluded it, then we can have a discussion on that. I am raising it because if the committee gives us a go-ahead, we would need to, there are a lot of logistical arrangements that need to be dealt with.
That's fine, Mr. Chair. If there is going to be an oversight in Limpopo, I would very much like to accompany you.
Okay, so let me check the hands. So we agree that we will prioritize this issue of Limpopo urgently, because I would like a situation where when we go to the JSC,
You're under the tree, Chair.
we should be having dates to Limpopo. We don't want. Oh, so I was saying that.
Chair, I think you were frozen.
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I think you were frozen, Chair. Can the chair repeat?
Oh, okay. Yeah. Am I audible now?
Yes, Chair, from my side, I'm not sure for which other members. Can the members indicate if they can hear the chair?
Can again hear?
You can hear him now, but we couldn't hear him while he was under the tree.
Okay. No, I was saying that it would be good before we go to the JSC to have the dates of going to Limpopo, so that we don't create an impression that we are discriminating against other provinces. So I think if members do not have a problem, we will start with the preparations and the format. And since other members are indicating that they would like to join the Limpopo leg, then we have to agree on a format. Is that in order?
Yes.
Agreed, Chair.
Okay. No, I don't. Honorable Janche? Okay, it's agreed. Honorable Horn, I can see your hand.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to confirm for the sake of specifically the ANC members that the announcement has just been made that stage 2 load shedding will run continuously for days on end, and I assume years on end, implemented to be immediately. So we will be affected tomorrow, Jay. Thank you.
No, I was using my phone. I don't foresee tomorrow as having a very long meeting. I think it will be much shorter. Let's try and push and see how far can we take it tomorrow, and then. But I think it will be important that we meet tomorrow, and then we can see how far can we push. Is that in order, members?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Since we all have connection problems, can I declare the meeting to be adjourned?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. The meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Recording stopped.